Before we move on to the bracelet, let us make this a little bit fun and assemble the components that we have created so far. So go to mechanical design and select assembly design. And then you're going to select product 1 and insert existing components. Now I'm hoping that you have saved all your files in one folder, and you're going to search it here, and we're going to start with the middle case. If there are any sketches or access systems which are still on display, you can hide them. Only leave the part body. And the next thing we want to bring in is the dial. But before we do that, I want you to come here to the axis, right click and select snap automatically to selected object. And that way, every time we select an object, the compass is going to snap onto that object and you can move it. And to remove it, all you have to do is remove it like so. So once again, select product 1 and insert the dial. And we want to make sure it's in the right position. So first, we can move it out here. And the first constraint we are going to do is a coincident constraint. And that is the axis of this circle with the axis of this circle. So select coincident constraint. And if you select the side of the circumference, you can see an axis. So select it. And then once again, the side of this, select it. So now we have a coincident constraint, and we are going to, that's going to make sure they are aligned. Before we update, we are going to add an offset constraint between the back of this dial and this face right here. So you can either select this face and insert 1 millimeter, or you can select this face and the offset can either be 0, or we can add, say, 0.5. So that it just goes off just a little bit from there. So 0.5. 0.5 is actually big. Let's reduce this to, let's just reduce it to 0.1 because they're supposed to be aligning. And then update. And your component should snap to the position that you just set the constraints to. As you can see. So we have now the space to bring in the case back. So let's bring that one in. Select product 1, insert existing component, and select the case back. Once again, you can move it aside so that you're able to set the constraints. And we're gonna start with the coincident constraint. So select coincident constraint, and you can start with this circumference here with the inner circumference here. Next is going to be offset constraint between this face. So select that face, insert an offset constraint, and this top face here. We are going to have a contact constraint. So you can either select contact constraint here, or you can offset that to 0. I prefer to use offset. I don't know why. And select OK, and then you can update. And as you can see, our case back is right in place. Now let's come up, and the next thing here to add is going to be the crown. Product 1, insert existing component, crown. Let's move it. So the first thing we want to do is a coincident constraint between this face and this inner face. So let's do that. That axis and that axis. Next, this face is going to be in contact with this face here. So either a contact constraint or offset it to 0 between this face and this face. We have 0. Select OK and update. And there we have our crown right into place. Next, we're going to add the movement hands. So remember this shaft that we made. The hour hand is going to sit here. Then the minute hand here, and the second hand is going to be last. So select product 1 and insert the hour hand. Here it is. And we can hide this axis system. Now what we want to do first is a coincident constraint between this circular surface where it's going to sit. So you can zoom in, make sure you're selecting it, that face. And this inner face. So let's redo that again, undo. It seems there was another surface selected. So select a coincidence between this axis of that face and that axis. Next, once the hour hand is installed, this top surface here should be level. So select offset constraint. It should be level with the top face of this hour hand, this face. So the offset should be 0. Select OK and update. Now if you come here, you can see what I was talking about, that bottom surface there, it sits right on top of that bottom shaft, and then the top surfaces align. Let's bring in the minute hand. It's right here. We're going to repeat the same thing. So hide this axis system. Select coincident constraint. You can right click here and reframe on it. Then select this inner surface axis. And that. And then once again, an offset constraint between this face with this top face, which is 0. Update. And now you can see where the minute hand sits. I hope this is now making sense. Lastly, we have the second hand. If you select it from the tree, this automatically snaps to it. And once again, coincident constraint between that axis. Now for the second hand, as you can see, it's supposed to be mounted using this face. So you can select it. Then next we have offset constraint. And you're going to select this top face. With this top face and enter 0. Update. There it is. So that's how we usually assemble the movement hands. I'm going to rotate them so that they don't all face the same sides. This one, I'm going to rotate it upwards and then just update. And as you can see, the movements have been updated. Okay, let's bring in the crystal gasket. Let's select it here and move it. And once again, a coincident constraint between this and this. And then we have an offset constraint between this surface here and don't know if we'd be able to see. It's a bit tricky, but we want that face, the bottom face, and it's going to be 0. Update. So now the crystal gasket has been installed up here, and now you can adjust its parameters based on how you want the visibility to be. So one thing that we didn't make is the ring. So once you install this crystal gasket, there's a ring here, and that's what we are going to make in this video before we move on to making the bracelet and assembling it here. But before we make that ring, let's adjust these parameters. So come here to crystal gasket and open it up using the specification tree and double click on this, the material that is. It's going to bring you back to part design. So double click on it. Remember, you can just open the crystal gasket from the original file and adjust it. The changes are going to reflect here. We're going to tweak some parameters such as the transparency. I think now we can add it almost to the end. Say 0.98. Apply and select OK. So now the ring is going to sit from the outer surface of this gasket, which was 35.2 in circumference. Okay. And it's going to sit on this vertical space, which was 1.5. And then it's going to extend outwards. And then we are going to chamfer the top part of it. You can now hide these constraints. Let's remove the snap automatically for now, because we've finished moving the components. I have to check that one later, but it seems the crown here, there is a sketch which is visible, so we can check on that later on. For now, let's go make the dial. So first, let's select product 1 and go back to assembly design. And you want to right click and select product 1 edit. So that brings you back to the assembly model. So you can check whether you are in the assembly or part design model here. If it's .cat part, you're in part design, but if it is product, you're in assembly module. So we're going to select file, save as, and we can name this however we want. We can name it assembly 1, Rolex assembly 1. So let's make the ring now. Go to start, mechanical design, part design. We're going to name this the ring. We're going to sketch the XY plane. The ring is pretty simple. Just double click on circle, make 2 concentric circles here. By the way, you can select on this icon here, geometrical constraints, to automatically insert constraints when you create any geometry. The reason we were not using this initially is because it's better first to learn how to make the constraints yourself. But now if you come so far, if you watched the first series and this second series, I'm sure you already know how to do that. So you can select on this icon. And these are radius, and we want to define them in diameter. So if it's radius, then it's half of what we were going to add. So the inner one was 35.2. So we are going to make an allowance of 0.05. So that 5.25 over 2 if it's the radius. And this one is 39 in diameter, so over 2. And then exit. Create a pad which is 1.5 in depth or height. And then select this outer edge. We're going to chamfer 1.3 millimeter in depth, and then 45 degrees angle. You can cross check here to see where the length is. Preview. Select OK. And then these two corners which are close to the crystal gasket, we're going to add a fillet so that they don't scratch the crystal gasket. Point 1. Select OK. Then add a material. I'm going to change the ambient so that it's kind of different from the other. So that's the ring. We can now assemble it to the watch. So first save it. Reopen the assembly. And select product. Insert the ring we just created. Reselect snap automatically to selected object and select the ring. That way you can move it. So you're going to select a coincident constraint, and it's going to be between this outer surface of the gasket and that inner surface of the ring. Lastly, we have an offset constraint or a contact. The contact can be with this face, or you can select offset the top surface of the crystal gasket with the top surface of the ring, and it's going to be 0. Then update, and you can see it. Here is the ring. I changed the ambient so you can see it properly. So we're done with the watch part. We are going to come and adjust the materials later on to whatever aspect we want. But for now, let's hide this. New constraints that we just made. Okay, so far so good. Of course, we are going to adjust the materials such as this movement hand so they are more visible. The steel is very dark. We need to make it look like the oyster steel, but that will come later on. For now, let us now make the bracelet in the next episode. So see you in the next part.